Hey, what's going on, guys? Ben Milliken here for 6 Cents Fishing, and I am so excited to finally bring you the Hangover line through swim bait. This thing is a long time in the making. It's been several years process designing this from the first write-ups all the way until the finished product, and it is finally ready for release. Since I moved down here to Texas, there is one bait that has caught the majority of bass over 10 pounds for me, and that is the soft line through swim bait. There's so many different ones on the market that I've tested, I've tried, and it always seemed like there was one thing or two things wrong with the ones. I was still catching fish on them, but there was something that I wanted to change. And so we implemented everything that I thought was wrong about every other one that I was previously using. And we took the best of all the different applications of all the different baits and we put it into one bait right here. So let's talk about the aesthetics of this bait, and then I'm gonna get into where you guys should throw this bait and the tackle that you're gonna wanna pick up, which really is gonna be a lot of tackle that you guys already have, which is great. So looking at this bait right here, you'll notice one thing that's different than a lot of line through swim baits, and that is the line through port actually comes out the back of the swim bait. And there's a very good reason for that. I was throwing line through swim baits that had the traditional line through that came out the belly, and the hook sits right down there on the belly. Well, as you guys can imagine, I'm fishing this thing around a lot of different types of cover. I'm fishing it over the top of grass, brush piles, laydowns, docks, just basically anything in the water that I'm seeing either on forward-facing sonar or with my eyes that I'm creeping that bait over the top of. And as soon as you guys do that, you know exactly what happens. These trebles on the bottom of the bait are gonna hook and snag on every single thing, every piece of cover that there is. That is why we put the hook on the back. Another reason is when I'm fishing for the biggest fish in the lake, they're very, very smart. Their eyeballs are that big, they see extremely well. Almost all these fish are ambushing from below and from behind as well. With that hook concealed behind the bait on the very top of it, those fish get a much less look at the hook. All they're seeing is this natural kicking swimming motion that is so seductive. Now, for the size of this thing, we went with like a 6 1/4 inch size. Could have very easily come out with an 8-inch model, a 9-inch, a 10-inch model, and it would catch a lot of giant bass for everyone. But I wanted a bait that was as applicable for as many different people and as many different applications as possible. So I wanted a bait that was big enough that it would attract and draw bites from the largest bass in your reservoir. Even if you're down in Texas and you have 15 to 20 pound bass, this guy gets bites from them. But I can't tell you guys how many 2-3 pound bass that were just really important fish for me in a tournament, or just, you know, fish that wouldn't eat anything else. You pull this big bait by them and they eat this thing just as well. So I wanted it small enough that it appealed to a ton of different sizes of fish, but big enough that it could still draw the biggest fish in the lake, and that is what it has done. I don't know how many 10 pounders I've caught on this bait. I've got a whole bunch of these different test ones, all these prototypes we've had out the last few years, getting everything dialed in with color patterns, with sink rates, with different types of weighting in them to see what was just right. And like I said, this is what we landed on. And when we launched this bait, we're coming out with 3 different sink rates. And I think a lot of people might be confused by that. Let me give you a simple breakdown of the 3 different sink rates. We're gonna have the slow, the medium, and the fast. Now, you might look at that and think that the slow is meant to only be fished in shallow water, the fast is meant to be fished in super deep water, and the medium somewhere in the middle, of course. But actually, there's not really a right or wrong place to throw these. A lot of times I'll take this slow sink, and I've caught bass down to 40 feet deep with that. It's all about reading the mood of the fish. And so obviously when you have this thing sink super slow, the slow will sink generally, I would say, about a foot every a second and 1.5 seconds, maybe 2 seconds. And it works much, much slower down at those speeds, so where you can really stall that bait in the water column way down there at deeper depths. And the same goes for the fast sink. I've caught fish in 1 foot, 2 feet of water on the fast sink because you can really burn that bait, kind of just like plowing a shallow crankbait through some rocks, some gravel, any type of hard cover down a riprap bank. It's absolutely awesome for that technique. Fast one sinks probably 1.5 feet to 2 feet every 1 second, so much faster sink. And then the moderate sink is somewhere right there in the middle. It's a little bit more of an all-around application for that medium sink rate. A couple different cosmetic things about this bait that are very important. You'll notice when you look at the belly weighting of this bait, all the lead weighting is encapsulated by a plastic line through system, and that's not an accident. If you guys look at a lot of the older line through swim baits, a lot of you I'm sure have had this issue. The lead weighting was touching the soft plastic, and what happens, not even over time, I'm talking like within a couple weeks to a couple months, the entire head of the bait will start turning white, and before long all the plastic in the bait is completely destroyed. So you have your $20 to $70 bait that's destroyed. That doesn't happen when you encapsulate it with that plastic like we did right there. Another thing you'll notice is we put this little loop on the bottom. So if you guys do want to fish it like your traditional bottom hook line through method, you can throw that top hook in there, and then of course you can have your bottom hook as well, just as easy. So as far as where to fish this bait, I'm just gonna leave it up to you guys. I have fished this about everywhere in the water column. Whether you have live scope, this has been my favorite bait to live scope and throw out a big roaming bass in the middle of nowhere. But if you don't have live scope, that's fine too. You can fish this in the same type of areas where you're dragging, where you're deep cranking, shell beds, rock piles. Just throw one of these guys out there, drag this either on the bottom or a foot or two off the bottom. Just a constant wind, and you'll get that tail kick. You'll really see all three of the different weighting systems will have their own unique tail kick at the right speed. You'll have to kind of play with that a little bit, look at it next to your boat, but there's no wrong way to fish these baits. They skip very, very well, especially the slow sink model. You can skip it up under a dock real far. You can fish it over the top of brush piles. You can fish it over any type of grass, lay down, stuff like that. Anywhere you throw your traditional 6-inch swim baits already, either by themselves with a harness or with a jig head model, you can throw this line through, and I feel like this is an even better presentation than anything out there that's gonna just help you catch more solid and giant sized bass. So it doesn't matter where you're at in the country. Everywhere I go, these fish prefer natural bait fish patterns whenever I'm throwing these line through swim baits, and we have some incredible colors that we have finalized. We've got see-through shad colors like this guy right here, all the way to colors that are almost like a natural bait fish with some bone on the bottom. These are a couple of my favorites right here too. We're actually able to incorporate some of our live imaging technology on these baits as well. So we got natural crappie patterns, natural shad patterns that you're just not able to get on any other bait that's like this. And then, you know, just a bunch of traditional, like a hitch type pattern. We got natural see-through blue top, a little bit of pearlescent on the belly. Just colors that are absolutely gonna get bit no matter where you are in the country. There's gonna be a color for you. I've caught more giant bass on these line through swim baits than any other bait that I've ever used in my life, and I want you guys to have that same success. Pick them up right now at 6centsfishing.com in any of the 3 sizes and go out and catch your PB.